Welcome back to another tutorial on VCV Rack 0.5. This time let's take a look at JW's modules. So he has a bunch of cool modules. Let's take a look at each one individually. So we'll get rid of these. Alright, so if we go to JW, let's take a look at the full scope. So nothing's really labeled, but it's not that hard to figure out. So let's create some LFOs. We'll want a few of these. And let's take the sine wave and put it into the first one. So we have this pulsing line. Let's take another sine wave from the second LFO, put it into the second one. So now we have kind of a looping circle. If we adjust this first little knob, we can see it kind of moves the offset. If we adjust, see, that's the time. One of these is how long it's displayed. Yeah, there we go. So this last knob is how long the line stays around for. So this third knob is kind of a scale in the X. That's a scale in the Y. That's a rotate. Let me get it positioned and then I'll talk about it. All right. So you have basically the Y position controlled by this yellow wire. That's the second input. The X position is controlled by the first wire. And so it's going to make a visual pattern, kind of like a one of those old school things where you have like a pencil and then you rotate it. What those things are called. All right, so this first knob, that's the X offset. Second knob is the Y offset. Third knob is the scale of X, all the way down, all the way up. Fourth knob is the scale of Y. Fifth knob is a rotation function. So if I have it very slightly off zero, rotates slowly. If I turn it all the way up, rotates quick. And the other direction rotates the other direction. And then the last knob is how fast it draws. So if I turn it all the way down, it's like almost how fast the end catches up. So if I turn it all the way up, the end catches up immediately. If I turn it all the way down, the end takes a long time to move. So it kind of paints for a long time. All right, then there's three other inputs. So the third input, that's a color. So like if you shift it, if you run a fast LFO through it, it's going to blink in colors really quick. Barely seeable. Slower LFO will slowly change the colors. Turn down the... Alright, then the fourth input, that's a rotation. It's rotating based on its LFO, so it's going to slow down and then speed up. Fifth one, this is like a time, I believe. Yeah, when it's low, nothing happens. When it's high, things happen, so it kind of jumps to where it should be, something like this. So it creates these weird patterns. This is kind of a cool visual plugin. Doesn't really serve any audio purposes, but it's kind of neat for visual effect. And to kind of, similar to like kind of the oscilloscope here where you say X and Y, but just a bit more fancy. So it's a nice module. Let's take a look at more stuff from JW. So we have the grid sequencer. I'll come to that one a little bit later. How about the min-max? So min-max is a nice simple one. So if you plug in, it has a single input, and it will tell you what the minimum value was and the maximum value was based on some time. So if I yank the time all the way down, the min and max of this LFO is 0 and 10. Now if I make this LFO faster and then I speed up the time, you can kind of see how it's catching just a bit of the wave. If I speed up the time all the way, and slow down the LFO, you can kind of see how it's just sampling the wave as it moves. So for what time frame do you want the Minimax to apply? Kind of a cool little oscilloscope-like device, but very numeric, which is nice. All right, then we have simple clock. This is a clock interface. We'll take a look at this one when we look at the grid sequencer. We have a wavehead, another visual module, this single input with this guy moving. So he hooked up to an LFO, for example, he's going to move up and down based on that 0 to 10 that we just saw with the Minimax guy. So if we turn up the LFO, he's going to go up and down quicker or slow. Another cool visual module. Then we have XY pad. This is another visual module, kind of, but instead of output, it's actually visual input, which is kind of cool. So you can draw whatever shape you want, and then you can tell it to run by clicking this auto button, and it will trace that pattern. So let's say you just do kind of a circle here. Then the X and Y will, so the X, let's also use his min-max. So you can see his min's going between 1 and 4 for the X. Kind of 1 and 4 for the Y because it's a circle. Now if I were to kind of go like this, now the X is from 0 to 5. And you can kind of see on the oscilloscope over here. Now if you want to change those numbers, there's some knobs up here. So you can scale X, so it's from 0 to 10. You can scale Y, so it's also from 0 to 10. Let's just draw a square. And we'll scope the let's see, Y is, how come X is only from 0 to 5? Should be scoping differently, huh? That's 0 to 10. Oh, it's because my scale right here is it's wacky. That's what it is. All right, there we go. These scale knobs are wrong. Okay, so now both are going from 0 to 10, as you can see on the oscilloscope. There's also a negative version of those ones. Scope that. Let's slow down the speed. This is a speed knob, so we can control how fast this thing moves around. Let's look at X versus negative X. So you can kind of see they're inverted. Now it's not 0 to negative, it's the opposite of if it's outputting 0 on this one, it's going to output 10 on this one, and vice versa. There's also a X and Y offset. So if you were to center that one, so now we're offset. Let me put that back into this min-max guy. We'll do 2 of them. So now the XY pad's going from -5 to 5 because this X offset is in the center. Now if I put him all the way to the other side, he's going from 0 to -10. As you can see there. And let's look at the Y values. So if X and Y are going from 0 to -10, if I turn both X and Y offset all the way over, Now there's also, so if you can also click this button right here to give it a different pattern, like a hand preset pattern, which is kind of nice. So you can see that's looping through some sine wave. Now if you click this second small button, this is different patterns in that kind of genre of preset. And they just cycle between all these kind of preset sine waves. If you click the first button, now you got square waves. Again, you can click the second button to cycle through the presets. And here's kind of a slow ramp curve. You can see it on the oscilloscope. Again, you can cycle through some presets of those. Kind of a nice exponential graph. Linear line. Random, kind of noisy. Bunch of presets there. Here's kind of like a speed up in terms of frequency. Here's some spirals. Which are kind of neat. Whole bunch of spirals. These ones are kind of cool. Got some crazy maze pattern. And you can see on the oscilloscope, it's kind of a subtle, kind of shifting all over the place. And there's a ton of different maze patterns. Kind of interesting. So it's a very flexible module. It's kind of neat. And you also, if you right click, you can choose backwards loop, forward one shot. So you notice how it stops. So then you probably have to gate in. We'll look at that in a second. Backwards one shot, forwards backwards loop. And then backwards forwards loop. Pretty similar to these two are pretty similar. Let's look at the forward one shot. So if we gate in LFO, is that going to trigger it? Looks like when it goes high, or when it goes low, it stops it. Let's see what would. Let's go to our VCV dual attenuverter. Go to high signal. So every time it's at the end, if you go back to 0 and then kick it off again, it'll do it again. But if you go to 0 and then back below 0, it's going to stop. So you need to keep that gate open, kind of like an ADSR, for as long as you want it to play. And if you want it to reset, you need to hit 0 and then do it again. You also have a control voltage for the speed. Let's take a look at that. Let's go back to the forwards loop. So you can see when it goes low, let's use our min-max dude on that. So you can see when the LFO goes around 10, it's super fast, or faster anyways. Once around 0, it slows down. have gate out. Let's take a look at that. So I guess if you wanted to one-shot it, you could do something weird like this. I wonder if that will work. I don't know if it will. Probably won't. Yeah, it won't, because the gate in has to be high while it's playing. So the gate out is kind of a one shot. So the gate out is 10 while it's playing and 0 while it's not playing. It's kind of a good look at this thing. I think that's all the features of it. It's pretty flexible though. Very cool. Alright. So that's the XY pad and the wave head. So let's take a look at the simple clock and the grid sequencer. So this is yet another sequencer. So it's a 4x4 grid. So let's take a listen to this. I have my ADSR hooked up to my VCA with a VCO input. So if we hook up the gate for the ADSR to the gate out, we can take a listen. Just need to run this thing. We need to put a clock into it, or a step sequence. So you need to control where the playhead is using these arrows. So let's have an advance one every 128 beats. And we should, in theory, get it to run. Square. And then just like we saw with the sequence 3, you have to right click and turn the gate mode to retrigger for an ADSR, so that this gate out isn't just a single pulse, but it actually stays open while the note's playing. Now, obviously, you also want this VCO to deal with this pitch. So let's hook up the V volts per octave to the output. And then we want some random notes, so you can click this button here. And as you can tell, the range of those notes is pretty high, more than we want. So the nice thing is they've included a range button right here. So let's take a listen to that. Turn down the range. So you kind of get a nice melody there. And the cool thing about this module is it's got a built-in quantizer. So these notes are C minor right now, so you can change it, of course. E minor. And he supports a whole bunch of different scales. There's E major. Hook up the clock, doesn't seem to work. The clock's not on. There we go. The clock was just not on. So you have to click this little button right here to turn on the clock. And now this is 120 BPM, beats per minute. Now notice this sequencer is only playing these first 4 notes. It's not going down because I haven't told it to go down at any point. So if you want it to go down, the clock has a nice divide by 4. So every 4th note, it's going to move down 1. So it has these nice buttons right here so you can randomize the notes. Try to find a pattern that you like. Click this button to randomize the gates. Creates more randomness though than probably desired. So you can click these little buttons right here next to these pitch knobs to turn on and off the gate, or you can click that randomize gate button. And of course you could move it backwards if you wanted to, or move it up. And you can rig up these kind of directions to anything you want, to LFOs and all kinds of craziness. So you could hook it up to LFOs. So you can see it's moving down at a slow rate, but moving left at a fast rate, and then every once in a while it's also moving backwards. So you can make it all kinds of weird patterns. It's kind of neat. You can also hook up to the RAND. It's going to go all over the place. So we'll just repeat that one note. Run obviously turns it on and off. So reset button, that'll reset it back to the beginning. Upper left corner. And of course you could LFO that thing if you wanted to. So I'll just reset it once in a while. Overall, it's a nice module because it's very easy to make it sound good because of the built-in quantizer and the range function. And repeating 4 notes is kind of a cool thing. I think that's a look at most of these things in this module. Ignore gate for volts per octave out. So that's on or off. Okay, so if you don't have that on, you can hear the volts per octave out is what is it set to? Let's take a look at his min-max guy. So it's 0.58, just like stuck there. But if you right click and you say ignore the gate, then even though these notes are all off, it's going to output a note, even when they're off. And now when they're on, it's not going to make a difference. It's kind of just another option there. I think that's a good look at the grid sequencer. Let's take a look at this clock real quick. So you can oscilloscope the clock. You can see it's kind of pulsing. Pulsing to 10 every once in a while. And this divided by 4 should pulse to 10 4 times as quick. It's probably hard to catch it on the oscilloscope though. Let's see if we can maybe catch it on the full scope. That's gonna be weird. Yeah, you can kind of see it every once in a while there, flashing. Probably easiest to see it with the grid sequencer. Yes, this is divide by 4, not multiply by 4. So it's 1/4 is slow. So if you have to have a pretty high beats per minute for it to pulse every second or so. So you can see it moving there. And then divide by 8. Will pulse obviously every half as slow as that, and then half as slow as that, then half as slow as that. Every 32. Let's try to take a look at this reset guy. So I think this will reset the so if we pulse every 32, and pulse every 8, you can kind of see it's there. Now if we click reset, in theory, it's not going to pulse. Because you're kind of resetting the clock to a specific point. It's kind of a reset out, huh? Let's take a look at that. So whenever I click the reset button, it goes high. You can also turn this knob for random resets. So you can see there it pulses every once in a while with just kind of a little bit. If you turn it up all the way, it's going to randomly reset fairly often. Let's hook back up our gate and our out so we can actually hear it. Put back on continuous retrigger. acting weird on me. Alright, there we go again. I don't see this random reset kind of impacting the divide by 4. Well, this button does, but this knob doesn't seem to. All this knob seems to do is to change this output to randomly go to 10 every once in a while. So I get maybe it's meant to be hooked up to one of these like random note guys or whatever. Nope, that doesn't seem to trigger it. The mysteries of the world. What does this knob do other than change the voltage here? Anyway, I think that's a good look at JW's modules. He's got some cool visual novels modules and some very useful utility sequencers. Min-max is really neat. That's a good stopping point. Thanks for watching. See you next time.